Okay.
Sorry, you're supposed to wait like 5 to 10 seconds.
Well, hello, good afternoon. My name is Amanda. I work over at Real Property Management, Last Frontier. We provide professional property management here in Anchorage, Eagle River, and the Wasilla area. I work with owners who have properties, and they're either intentional investors or what we call accidental landlords. And we provide management services, both full, partial, and other contracts. Here we also have Pasquale. He is our service manager.
And we will be talking today about leases. And that's a really important part of the property management, because basically the lease is what is going to rule everything that happens between you and your tenant. We also have the Landlord Tenant Act law, but basically what defines the small details here and there is going to be the lease. So we have an idea that if your lease is less than 6 pages, we need to talk. I mean, it doesn't need to be this thick, but the thicker the better means that you cover all the basics, and don't be afraid the tenant says, oh, that's way too long, and it has to be. That's going to save a lot of time and problems later on. So we have with us today our expert on leases, Sawyer. He is the one that is basically on a daily basis talking with tenants about renewing leases and how to make a good fit between what the owner wants and what the tenant wants, and how to put that together in one simple document. So he's gonna give us a few insights about.
Well, thanks, Pasquale. I came up with 4 line items that I think would be important to understand for having in a lease. And just so you know where these came from, like Pasquale said, a large part of my job is working with tenants through their entire time with us. And so there's been a number of recurring pain points that happen in a lease, and also areas where big mistakes happen and they could have been avoided because of clauses or something that could have been added in the lease. So that's where these are coming from, and so I'll get into it here. Number 1, the lease should contain very clear instructions and an agreement for turning in work orders. It doesn't seem like a big deal, but it is, and every single property is going to require a work order at some point. And so having it written in the lease very clearly how you want your tenants to submit that work order to you. If you have a specific email that you want just for work orders, so that you don't have it full of spam, so you're not going to miss that type of communications. If you have a phone number that you want them to call, make sure that it's clear on the lease and that you even go over it with them during the lease signing. The second thing that is really helpful to build into a lease is incentive to renew. What I mean by that is at the end of their term, how are you going to gently convince them to re-sign, because that's obviously what we want as landlords. For instance, having a percentage increase in rent if the tenants choose to go on a month-to-month after the end of their term. So that's an example of building that incentive into the lease. The alternative is their lease ends, and in order to incentivize them at that point in time, as a landlord, you come to them and say, okay, well, if you don't renew, I'm increasing rent by 5%. While it's the same effect, it has a different perception because it seems threatening, it seems malicious, and it doesn't ever go over well. The third thing is you should have clear instructions on how the tenant can access the Uniform Alaska Landlord and Tenant Act. There are a lot of situations that end up in court that could have been completely avoided if both parties had a very clear understanding of the state law in regards to tenancy. The fourth thing is, as an owner, you should have an understanding of state law in regards to rentals. If you buy a investment property, you are inheriting a lot of leases. It's your responsibility to check those leases and make sure that they're in compliance, and if they're not, it's really good to know that, because if one of those tenants gets themselves in a situation where you end up in court with them, you do not want to be showing up to a judge with a lease that is not in compliance with state law. To illustrate my point about having compliant leases, this is a lease that we inherited from a property. Once there was a purchase of the property, and then the new owners contracted us to manage it, and this is one of the leases that owner inherited. And this is not an old lease. This lease was signed in 2016. It appears to be written by someone versed in law because it's very wordy, but it's surprisingly illegal. And know that just because it's in a lease does not mean you can do it if it does not agree with state law. So I'm just gonna read you a quick section. This clause is saying if the tenant defaults on rent, then after 3 days, the landlord can choose to do one of the following items. Declare this agreement forfeited and the term ended, enter said premises with or without process of law, remove any personal property from the premises which belongs to any party, including the lessee for the tenant, and store elsewhere at the expense of the tenant, and lessor or owner shall not be liable for damages by reason of such removal. That is just the first 3. There's 9 of them total. Almost every single one of them is actually illegal. I just wanted to pose that as a example. Having an understanding of the Alaska landlord-tenant law is a necessity as a landlord. That's all I got. I said a lot. I hope I didn't lose anyone.
That was great.
But,
Thank you, Sawyer.
Yeah.
A lot of information, yeah. We're going to be doing a few videos here in the next coming weeks educating you about how to manage your properties appropriately. Stay tuned. Thank you.